Hello everyone, good to see everyone. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone that's here in person, and welcome everyone to watching online. What we're going to be doing over the next hour is presenting chapter 2 of the Eternals, but as well as that we're going to be taking a look back at chapter 1. We launched chapter 1 in March, but with everything we've all experienced this year, we feel it'd be nice to go back and take a refresh and take a look at it, so that you guys can understand the collection in its entirety and all the stories that go along with it. We're going to be focusing on a little bit on the techniques, and Ashley's going to be talking about the colour formulations and the approach. But just as importantly as that, we're going to be focusing on the principles behind the collection, the why just as much as the how, because I think when you understand the why, then that can hopefully spark something in your mind, so you go on to create something else for yourself and adapt this look, or take a little kind of grain of inspiration and make it into something else. And so I think whenever I see something, I always like to know the why just as much as the how. But before we get into that, I'd just like to say it's great to be back doing anything or doing something. It's obviously been a difficult year for everyone, I'm sure, that's here, but I can speak for myself, and I'm sure I can speak for all the people that have worked on this event. We're very happy to be back doing what we do. So thank you to everyone for being here, and I hope we have a great event. So Ashley is currently working on a look called Meta a Meta, which you can see over on the easel to my left. The idea for this colour came, it was twofold. I'd had the idea of wanting to create reversible hair colour, where the wearer could change their parting to the left and have a darker tone, and change their parting to the right and have a lighter tone. And then when we started to look at the colour choices, what I wanted to do was to try and create the challenge. The challenge was to create two colour tones that are far enough apart from each other so that they create separation, but close enough together so that they don't clash. And that is the colour choice, and that's something that Ashley had to work on tirelessly when we were developing the looks, to basically experiment with all the kind of palette that Mask and View has to offer. And what we found was that even we looked at grains of wood, so if you look at the pagoda that we're in today, you can see the contrasting colours in the grains of wood. Now, if you was to be looking at a piece of wood, and as you can see here, there's very, very dark and very, very light panels of wood side by side. And if you was to think of that as on a colour chart, they would be quite separate, but they don't clash. And that's because the tones and the very nature of them are quite cohesive. It doesn't look like a stripy piece of wood. It has a naturalness to it, and that's the biggest challenge that Ashley and myself undertook when looking at this. We've done a slightly subtler version as well, which you'll see in the finale, of just some browns that are very, very close to each other, and that's to give more of an example of what would be very, very relevant in the salon. I've done it on a couple of clients, and it's really nice. They love the fact that they can just change parting and have a very different tone on whichever day they would prefer. Ashley's I'm going to pass you over to Ashley, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the practical colour development and the formulations that she used to create it.
Thank you, Tom. So with the Meta e Meta, we worked with, I'm just going to spin you round, thank you. We worked with 9,04 in Mask with Vibrachrome on this side here, just so that we got like that shift of lightness, but still with that beautiful copper tone. And then over on this side, I'm working with 8,44 equal parts with the new nuance 4,44 in View. And the reason we've kind of worked with those two together is working with that 6 and that 9 just gave us that perfect balance between it being enough apart but still close enough together for that almost double take look, like Tom was saying with the grains of wood. And it's really kind of important for me to bring to you working with mask and view together because it works so beautifully. So whilst this is developing, I can apply this, and then actually by the time that I finish, it all develops all together. So it's a really quick, accessible, salon-friendly technique as well.
Yeah, that's something that when we were developing the looks, the combination of mask and view together, we were thinking from an inspiration point, and we were thinking, okay, what's going to make a stimulating image to look at, and what's going to be an interesting use of colour, but also what's going to be relevant in a salon. And as we all know, we all work in salons, and as I'm sure most of you watching at home do, time is a big issue in the salon. And if you're going to introduce something new to your client, you need to be considerate of time, because we all have an allotted time slot, and especially on busy days, and even more so now with the extra restrictions that we're facing. So we felt using mask and view together, due to the different development times, was a really clever use of time, and the kind of the varying effects that it gets from the different shine levels and the different levels of lift. It's they're a beautiful palette to combine, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
So you can see over to my right, where I was talking about the grains of wood. This is, Ashley was probably going crazy with the amount of panels of wood I was sending her via email, saying, what about this and what about this shade? But so it's the example is, I suppose, probably best shown in here and here, as you can see the image. So you have the kind of light coppery, and then you have the deep kind of burnt red, but it doesn't look too contrasting, and that's the thing that when we were developing the tones, we really had to focus on. Was it has to be close enough to be cohesive, but separate enough to separate. And I think if once people start using that in the salon and start to understand that it's just the colour choice, and if the hairdresser makes the colour choice, it's an application that one of the more, say, junior members of the team could apply. But if the technician's kind of creative eye can help choose that right tones that works with the eye colour and the skin tone, it's a really interesting. It's a way to take your clients one step ahead, not 3 steps ahead. And you can do a very, very subtle version, or you can do a slightly stronger version, as we did in the Eternals. But it's an approach that I think, if spoke about properly to the clients, could do really well. So Ashley's just finishing off here, and before we introduce chapter 2 of the Eternals, we're going to take a look back at the emotional video from chapter 1. Okay, so that was the chapter 1 emotional video, which we launched in March. Chapter 2 is very connected. It was shot at the same time, but chapter 2, probably even more so than chapter 1, has a much more of a colour focus. We have a very, very strong blonde image, but we also, to start off, what I'm going to demonstrate on today is a look called Beam. But before I do that, I'd like to just show you the emotional video from chapter 2, so you can take a look at the images for the first time. welcome back. I hope you enjoyed seeing the chapter 2 of the Eternals for the first time and seeing the whole collection as 9 images. You can see here what I've got on the look we've got on Tanya is from chapter 2, and it's called The Beam. And this idea came from how I normally work on my creative process. Just going to spin you around. And that is, I always have a file of ideas that I keep, and anytime something catches my attention, and it could be a song lyric, it could be an image, a photograph, a texture, anything that I don't really question too much about why it catches my attention. I just put it into the file and figure that out later. And about once per month, I go through the file to try and understand why those things have caught my attention. And invariably, there is a red thread. There's a connection through those things that my brain has been noticing over that period of time. And this image was no different. So one day, when at one of the kind of sessions where I was looking at the file to see what I could develop for the next collection, or the first collection that was for me, I saw I'd saved a couple of images where there was a beam of light going past the model, and the model had quite natural hair. I'll spin you around. But I'd saved an image where the model was stood by a window, and there was a beam of light coming through some like kind of Venetian blinds that was casting light shadows on the hair. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. So why have I saved that, and why have I saved a couple of those images? So that type of thing of these like beams of light was in my mind. But I didn't really know the shape, I didn't just want to do kind of a beam of light that didn't have a meaning. And at the same time, when I was looking through the file, I'd put this picture by the artist Bridget Riley, and that image is called The Kiss. And I think it kind of gives the shape of a mouth, kind of, making it a kiss shape. And when I was, at the same time I'd been thinking about the beams of light, I saw this image and I was like, okay, I like the way that this light panel separates the two darker panels, but without it being kind of too stark. I felt like it had a nice flow to it, and something that I'll always think is essential when working on a head of hair is a flow. I don't like things to be too rigid. The head is a curved shape. So I started to think, and I sent this to Ashley and said, okay, we've got this, we want to do the beams of light, we want to do something based around this Bridget Riley image of starting narrow and ending wide. And we always like to do things, I think a good place to start when you're developing looks like this is okay, what is the usual, what is the norm that someone would normally do? Now, someone would normally apply the darker colour through the root, and then the hair goes lighter through the ends. I think that's because that's how hair naturally lightens in the sun, with the ends being more porous. So Ashley and I decided to reverse that and to put the panel of lighter hair through the root on the shorter side, as you can see on the easel. And then with that line, as the Bridget Riley image does, it widens and diffuses as it goes through to the longer side, coming through here. And that was basically the initial inspiration for that. And then from there it just became about the placement. And as I said before, we wanted to talk about the principles we used in the collections. One of the principles that I think I like to keep when I'm working on a look is the hair knows what it's doing much more than I ever will. Certainly when we're creating shapes with it. And I find that if something that Ashley and I worked on was this technique of free cutting and colouring. So trying to not be too technique based, but thinking of things more of a design problem. So okay, I'm doing this haircut now, but I'm letting the hair guide me. After each section I'm moving the hair around, and I'm letting it jump, and I'm letting it kick, and I'm letting it kind of, it's a conversation that you're having as you're cutting the hair, and you're seeing the movement. And the colour was no different in this situation. Because of the nature of the shape we were creating, it was very important that the hair was allowed to lie as naturally as possible. because if it wasn't allowed to lie as naturally as possible and we were manipulating it and being more technique based rather than more, let's call it, design based, then the line wouldn't have sat right. And I think that is something that Ashley and myself worked on with this collection, but it's something that we're very much going to push forward and explore with going forward. And I think the way that Ashley approached this, it was like approaching colour in a sculpture. So I'd cut the haircut before, and as I said, all of the haircuts in chapter 2 very much take a back seat. They are there as a canvas for the colour, and you can't. I think when you've got more of an okay, let's call it a more conceptual or experimental colour like this, you can't have a more conceptual experimental haircut, because then there's two things fighting against each other. One needs to give way to the other, and this is a colour collection. So this, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, what shape is going to serve as the best canvas for this panel of lighter colour that starts narrow in the parting and then finishes wide through the longer side. So if you just like to tilt your head. So once we cut that shape, and as I just said, Ashley was approaching it more along the lines of painting a sculpture. I created the shape, and then when we looked at it, we combed it into a position, and Ashley almost went on freehand and painted it, as you would if you had a sculpture that was a solid ceramic piece and you looked at it. She went through and painted the panel onto it, which I found was quite an interesting approach to colour, rather than doing, being technique led and going, okay, I was taught to do something like this, so I'm going to start to section off, and I'm going to be. It was a much freer approach, and this freedom, this free cutting and free colouring that Ashley and I are developing, it's a very nice way to work for the person that's doing it, but it's the best way I've found to make sure that the hair belongs to the wearer, not the person that's doing it. Because as I'm cutting Tanya's hair, like I say, I've got the basic idea of the shape, but I'm being very free and very kind of loose with the technique. And that's because I want the haircut to take me the last 30%. I want to kind of empower the hair to kick and move, because once Tanya or whoever is your client, once they leave and they go home and they wake up and they try to go to work or drop their kids at school or whatever, the hair's going to do whatever it wants to do anyway. And I think certainly when I found that I was thinking more along that type of line of letting the hair lead me, I think my clients appreciated it much more, and I feel like the colours and the cuts that we were creating served the clients better. So that's something that both Ashley and myself are going to be really pushing on with during the next upcoming collections that we're going to be doing. It's almost like a cut or a colour, certainly in the salon, and this was designed to be a salon collection. It's designed, some looks are stronger than others, but everything's designed to be relatable in the salon. And I find when working in the salon, the best way that I found to work is to think of everything as a design problem rather than a technique. And I've been in many staff rooms where I'm spinning you around, where hairdressers say, okay, I have a half head of highlights, or I have a full head of foils, or a one length bob, and that's a technique. But if you start to think of your colours or your cuts as a design problem, and you're just going to use all your skills to solve that design problem, your day becomes so much more enjoyable when you're not you use the techniques as a tool rather than the techniques using you. And because a hairdresser is no different than someone who designed this comb, or the person that designed this village, or this pagoda, or these cameras that are filming us today. It's every designer has a budget, they have a material to work with, they have a client that's going to give them a brief, and we have 9 clients a day that are giving us briefs. You have a time limit that you've got to work in, and then you use your skills and your creativity to solve that design problem. And for me, the second I started to think of my work in the salon as a design problem that I was going to try and solve, God, your day just becomes so much more enjoyable. And that's the biggest aim, rather than techniques or people using them in the salon from this collection. The biggest thing that I would like for the hairdressers that are interested in it to do is to start thinking like that. Because the biggest, say, travelled road I've found to people becoming kind of frustrated with their job or feeling a little bit kind of, monotonous in their day-to-day is that feeling of your client arrives in the salon and you say, okay, we're going to do the same again to your hair, your same colour, the same cut, because that can kind of like grind you down after a little bit. But if this collection even makes people just think one time tomorrow, I'm just going to try one thing different on that client, then in the next week you try it on 2 clients, and then you try just one little detail from this collection on the week after. Believe me, your day becomes so much more enjoyable, and your clients notice it, because then your clients, they're not paying for your hands anymore, they're paying for your mind. And if your clients come to you for your mind, then they can't go anywhere else. And that is certainly for me, when I still see a lot of clients each week, it's the best way I've found to one, enjoy my job, but to make sure that the client is getting the most unique experience they can. So I think to sum up this collection as a whole, rather than the techniques, that's what I would like people to come away with it with. Just thinking along that little bit more of a designer route rather than a hairdresser executing a technique type of route. So with this collection, for anyone who saw the launch of it in March, we spoke about the fact that the big thing with it was transparency and authenticity, that it was all shot in natural sunlight. There was no post-editing to the hair at all. Nothing was removed, no colours were changed. It was as it was shot in the natural sunlight. And that's because if you see it, we want you to be able to recreate it as it is. If you use those tones that are in the technical manual, then you should be able to recreate it like that. And with that in mind, we decided with this event today to just take it a couple of steps further. So that's why we decided to do it in the garden, using the sun as the hairdryer. And you may notice there is no electric on the stage, which everything's going to dry naturally in just the heat of the day. So we're pretty much finished with Tanya's haircut, but at this point I'd just like to call Ashley in to come and explain the colour formulas, but also the technique she used to develop this beam of light colour.
Thank you, Tom. Like Tom previously said, with this beam, we really wanted to think about how we could take it one step further. So rather than it being just situated through the top, we wanted to make sure it went all the way through. So as the hair turned, and because we were working with the natural fall of the hair, it was all about making sure that as that hair moved and as it moved around in its natural form, you continue to see that loop all the way around. With the colour formulation, we used 12,21 in mask with a small dash. For this model, I added 12,11 just because we're working on a darker base. I wanted to make sure that we got a really beautiful tone. We went for mask rather than Century of Light because we wanted a more subtle, like the light was just naturally going through the hair. And then through the rest, we toned it after pre-lightening. The base is the new nuance in view, 6,23, and then we've toned the beam for this model with 10,23 and 8,23. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashley. Okay, so now we've heard about the formulas, we've heard about the development of the colour tone, but let's take a look yesterday with Ashley preparing the colour. So welcome back. The next look that we're going to be sharing with you from chapter 2 of the Eternals is the Parisian Blonde. And the reason it's called Parisian Blonde is, one, it's blonde, which makes a lot of sense, but two, I had a picture of the actress Jane Birkin, how she had the way her fringe sat. It was a very unusual way of having a fringe. It was a very shallow fringe, and it only was cut to the center of her eyes. So what happened was you had hair falling over from the sides, and I thought it was a very cute way to wear a fringe, but also it was a very versatile way to wear a fringe in the salon. And I've done it on a few clients, and the reason they like it's a nice introduction to a fringe because you're not having the whole thing cut in. So with this look, I'm just going to spin you around, please, Siggy, all the way around. With this look, I'd had it when we were developing the looks for the collection. I knew that I wanted to create a blonde shot. I knew I wanted to create kind of an ultra blonde, as we were calling it. But as far as the idea, I kind of set that as a task for Ashley. I said, think about. I want to do the Jane Birkin fringe. I want to do this cute little bob that is square in a shape, but then it has these little disconnected, razored kicks towards the face. That's the canvas that I want. But this collection is a colour collection. So let's do the kind of ultra cute blonde, but let's think out of the box and do something a little bit different with it. So we had a few different images, like we had this silver lake where this boat is traveling through the lake and makes this beautiful silver, and we thought of what we could combine that with. And then Ashley went away and started to think, and then she came back with a very, very unusual reference. So before I go on with the haircut, I'm actually going to invite Ashley onto stage now to come and talk about the colour inspiration and how she developed it.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, when Tom was telling me about the haircut and this kind of Parisian bob style, it just instantly made me think of an advert from my childhood, and I don't know whether you all at home have watched this advert and you have it in your country, but it was for Petit Filou, which is like a little yogurt drink, and there was this little girl in this advert, and she just had the most perfect blonde bob, fully natural. And that's kind of what I was thinking when we looked at the rest of the collection. Even everything was about natural movement and natural tones. So when I thought of this advert, I sent it to Tom and was like, this is the perfect blonde bob because there is natural multiple tones running through it. And then to take it one step further, it was kind of all about the fact that a lot of the time in salons we will pre-lighten and tone, and the toning is something we do very quickly at the backwash, and it doesn't become part of the service. It's just this quick add-on, and actually without that toning and without that toner we don't get the perfect blonde. So it was about really creating a beautiful technique around the toning service. So I've gone through and worked with ribbons of colour, layering them up one by one throughout, working around the head. And we've worked with View 9,22 on its own, and then we've worked with a new nuance in View. We've worked with 10,34. So working with that really cool and that really warm tone, layering them up one by one. So one section's the 9,22, one section being the 10,34. So that layering it up diagonally throughout the head is giving us that really nice, beautiful, diffused, natural blonde. And it's one of my favourite looks, actually, I think, from the collection.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you. So, with the haircut, as you can see, I'm going through with a razor, and as I said, talking about the free cutting as we was doing earlier, I know the shape I want to create, but I'm letting the hair guide me after everything. I'm not being too rigid, I'm not being too small with my sections, I'm using the wide teeth of the comb. The reason I'm being quite large with the sections is I want to see the shape develop quickly. I want to see that chunkiness and that movement that comes through Siggy's hair when we cut it, so that that conversation that I'm talking about looking at the hair and seeing its reactions I can see it in real time. Something that I wanted to talk about was I've been thinking a lot, obviously, since joining Davines about what should a company, like Davines provide, or certainly what should the images provide. And I think anything, whether you're making clothes or whether you're making hair products, you want to be, the key is extreme quality in what you're doing, right? But it comes down to these collections should do and what the product should do is you can't have extreme quality without good quality material. And whether it's a colour or whether it's the Day Mist or whether it's the salt spray or whatever it is, I feel like it's the job of these collections to deliver looks and using products that are going to give you guys and also your clients the best material to do your best work on. And if we can do that with the collection, then that's kind of the whole point, because without this approach of natural drying, as you can see Tanya in the background drying there, this approach of natural drying only works if the hair's in optimum position, an optimum condition, and you're respecting the client, you're respecting the kind of structure of the hair. And that's certainly something since coming up to 10 months since I've joined Davines, that's something I've been super impressed with the products, is that the condition that they leave the hair in is almost even ahead of the performance, which I think the condition and the performance is the same thing, really. So we're coming round to the front here, and what I'm going to do, as you can see on the image where we've got the squareness, and then we have these little disconnected kicks into the hair. But I'm just going to take a curved section, and I was saying to someone earlier when we were working on this look, I never like to take like a straight section, whether it's in a colour or it's in a cut, because the head is a curved shape and I like to work in a very flowing way all across the head. I don't like to be too stiff or too rigid, so we're just taking a simple curved line that starts at the parting and goes to just behind the ear, and then I'm gonna put these little steps in. And the reason for this is, when I looked at the Jane Birkin image of the cute little fringe, I started to look, okay, that's cute because it's like a little step right at the front of her face. But if that works there, it can work in other parts of the head. So we started to look on this model, who was called Violet, at what areas of her face could we put these little steps. And again, this conversation with the hair, cutting it a little bit, letting it move, cutting it a little bit, letting it move. And I think when you do that and you approach colour in the same way, I don't know, it's almost like the model, she owns the haircut. Yeah, it's a haircut and a colour for a Davines collection, but it belongs to the person, right? She's got a job tomorrow and a boyfriend to go home to and a life to live, and I think that's something that we're always going to keep at the heart of any of the future collections that we do, that these collections are for people and for people to wear. And it's, as I was talking about my file of ideas before, during this lockdown, I got a subscription to Architectural Digest magazine, and there was a designer that was talking in there, and he designed the famous wishbone chair, which I'm sure, and he's called Hans Wagner, and he has a great sentence about designing chairs that pretty much sums up, it could be made for a salon collection, and it was, a chair's only finished when someone sits in it. And I think that's the same with a collection like this. The collection's only finished when someone goes out of the salon with it, or someone goes out of the salon with a version of it, or someone takes inspiration and creates something for themselves. Because that's how you move not just your own personal work forward, but that's how the kind of overall conversation of the industry moves forward, is by people just trying that one little step forward each day, and then the next week they try another step forward and another step forward, and it just goes on for there. And the reason I'm saying all this is it goes back to what I said when I first came on stage. This whole collection, as much as it's about the techniques, it's about the why, and it's about the principles of it, because once you know that, then you can go and create whatever you want from it. For anyone that watched the event we did in March, a big inspiration and a big touch point for this collection was DTA Rams, the minimal product designer. He worked for Braun for many years, and he had a huge sustainable approach to his design. But what I really liked about DTA's work was he developed a thing called the 10 Principles of Good Design, and a couple of them were something should contain as little design as possible. It should be as simple as possible to use. It should be as understandable. It should be sustainable. It should make sense. It should have a right to exist. And an approach that DTA used in his work was a restraint use of colour. So if you see a lot of his works, he will have details and he will have accents of colour, but he feels that a small detail of colour makes an object much more colourful than the whole thing being in colour. And that's why you'll see with a lot of the things, the beam or even something like the Parisian Blonde haircut. We try not to overdo it. If the colour concept is strong, then the haircut is soft, and if the haircut is strong, then the colour concept is soft. And I think I'm a big believer. I'm just going to spin you around. I'm a big believer in that you get one hard thing. You get one thing that's conceptual. So if Ashley and I develop a strong colour, then the haircut will take a back seat, and vice versa. But I think the key to this is, Davines has some fantastic styling products, but the approach is always from a colour focus, and then we start to work back on what will be the best canvas for this colour idea. So I'm just working back again in curved sections, trying not to be too structured and too neat with it. I'm really trying to get things that are a little unorganized in there, so it almost looks like it's a home haircut, like a cute little haircut that's just going to dry naturally. And if I just take your attention to the fringe, you can see that, as I mentioned about the Jane Birkin fringe, I've only cut Ziggy's haircut, her fringe, just to the centre of our eyes, and then you end up with these little kicks in front that's sitting very nicely on what would normally be her cheekbones, but it's sitting on a mask at the moment. But it's a nice way to cut a fringe without having the commitment, I suppose you would call it, as for a full fringe. So I'm going to add some curl primer all the way through. If I can actually ask you to just tilt your head forward for me, please. I'm just going to add some curl primer through, and then I'm going to add a little bit of salt spray, and she's going to go and join her friend Tanya by the fountain to just let her hair dry naturally. And I think it's such a, I don't know, it's such a nice way to work when you're creating a colour and you're creating a cut, and the colour, the cut, the styling products are all working in unison. So you don't need an overall big style. It's all just a very kind of holistic way of working. And you can take your head back now, please. And then when you work in that holistic way, I found that's the best way that you can move someone's personal style forward. You're not trying to make someone fit into a trend or a style or this is what's in this year. It's about the person and their individual. And I've worked with Ziggy before, and I've worked with Tanya before. So you get to know their hair, you get to know their personality. You're not just cutting for someone's bone structure and hair type. You cut into their life. Do they have a job that requires them to wake up at 5 a.m. so the haircut needs to be easy? Do they have? Do they spend a lot of time in another country? So that could have certain colour implications. So it's that holistic way of moving someone's personal style forward. I've found it means that the haircut and the hair colour belongs to the person, not the hairdresser that's doing it. So before we finish, Ashley spoke about the colour, but we'd like to just show Ashley preparing Ziggy's colour yesterday. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Ziggy. So, to finish off, we have the Meta a Meta look on the lovely Alicia that's going to come back. And as you can see, I'll just spin Alicia around so you guys can see the dual colour tones. If you can spin around, and you can see how if we take the parting to the right hand side, she kind of has a lighter copper hair, but then with the simple change of the parting over to the left hand side, she has more of a deeper red look, and it creates a real versatility, a 2 or a 3-in-1 colour look. But to finish off, and to account for the fact that we're in the beautiful garden, we'd just like to finish off with a very simple dressing on Alicia, ready for the finale. I'm not going to speak while we do that. We're just going to turn up the music a little bit. Ashley's going to work with me. We're going to dress Alicia's hair, and then we'll see you for the finale. Thank you very much. Spin around. Okay. Let's have the shimmer mist again.
This one.
If you could just hold this, just around this side. That's good.
Happy.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure.
If you could just hold this out. In fact, I'm going to flip it first.
Do you want to just angle yourself?
Yeah. Okay, that's enough. Are you good there? Thank you. just need a piece of elastic out of there. Okay. That's from before. I'll snip it.
Okay. One more, do you think that's all right?
I think that's fine. Okay, you can stay there. Give it that. Now, can I ask you to stand up? Step forward. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everyone that's here in person, and thank you to everyone that's watched online. I'd like to talk a little bit, but before we finish, about the future hair identity and what our plans and our aims are with that. But before I do, I just saw a very special guest that's just arrived all the way from Canada. My friend Anna Pachito is over there at the back. Oh, you said it. And so yeah, welcome Anna. I'm looking forward to speaking with you this week. But so yeah, the future hair identity. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and certainly this year, as I'm sure most other people have. It's give everyone time to reflect and time to properly digest where they are and what work they want to do going forward. And what we've come to the conclusion is that Davines has such a wide community and such a talented community with many different needs and many different focuses. And some people, they get inspired by things that they can take back to do on their clients. And some people are inspired, but maybe more by slightly more aspirational imagery that necessarily isn't for their clients, but it ignites something inside them. So to listen to the community, to work with both their needs, what we've decided to do, in the same way that a fashion house will have a couture and a ready-to-wear, that's what we're going to do going forward. We're going to have a conceptual collection, which isn't meant to be replicated in salons. It isn't meant to be kind of used in that way. It's meant to hopefully ignite something in you that you want to go and create some creative work yourself, and hopefully plays a small part in moving the creative conversation forward in hairdressing and making sure Davines has a very strong creative presence within that. And then we're going to have a lifestyle collection that's going to be totally focused on cool, relevant, wearable salon techniques and looks that you can take into a client of all ages, all ethnicities, and perform great work on. So that's how the two things are going to align side by side going forward. Ashley and myself are working away on them at the moment, and I'm very excited to share with you what we're going to be producing. And then to finish off, I just think I'd like to go back to what I very first said at the beginning. I think when you see an image or you see a piece of work in anything, it doesn't have to be hairdressing, there's two questions you can ask: is how or why. If the question when someone looks at my work is how, then it becomes about me, or it becomes about Davines, or it becomes about Ashley. But if the question you ask when you look at it is why, and you start to be inquisitive about the stories and the reasons behind it and the principles and the approaches, then it doesn't become about Davines or me or Ashley or anyone else. It becomes about you or you. Because then you're taking that little acorn of inspiration that hopefully has sparked something in your mind, and then you're going to adapt it and you're going to do it in your own style, and you're going to run with it and create something different. And that's how we move forward, and that's how you move forward. So we're going to be creating conceptual work, we're going to be creating salon work, but the question I would like everyone to ask with all of it is why, not how. So thank you very much for your time, for watching online. Thank you very much to everyone here for being here in person. It's great to actually do work in front of real people, and I hope everyone is staying safe, and I can't wait to get around the community and see you all soon. So thank you very much.